The first shot split the silence with fire. A flash tore through the stillness of the forest, and one of the SEAL operators dropped to the earth before his brothers even realized they were surrounded. The ambush came fast, sudden, merciless. Shadows slipped between the trees like wolves, rifles spitting death from the tree line. Every instinct screamed for survival, but the unit had walked into a kill box, cut off and outnumbered. The forest, once alive with the scent of pine and the rustle of leaves, now felt like a suffocating coffin, closing in on them with every bullet that cracked the air. Men scrambled for cover behind jagged rocks and fallen logs. Their radios crackled uselessly, jammed. The forest floor smelled of iron as blood mixed with damp earth. Panic flirted with discipline, clawing at even the most battle-hardened minds. The SEAL had trained for chaos, but this was different. Every path of escape had been calculated, sealed, predicted. The enemy had been waiting. It should have been their last stand. But in the chaos, something changed. At first it was only a whisper carried on the wind, the sharp, clean crack of a rifle, distant, deliberate, precise. One enemy went down, his body folding silently into the ferns, then another, and another. No one could see where the shots came from, but each one was surgical, each one delivered with the cold patience of a ghost. The ambushers froze. Confidence turned brittle. Their numbers, once their shield, began to thin with every pull of that hidden trigger. The SEAL, pinned and bleeding, realized they weren't alone. Someone else was out there, someone watching, someone hunting. Her name was never shouted. No orders were given. She didn't need them. She had been waiting in silence long before the enemy appeared, the forest already her domain. To those who didn't know her, she was only a rumor, a sniper who moved like smoke, who needed no acknowledgement, no validation, because her deeds carved her name deeper than any metal ever could. Her eye pressed against the scope, steady despite the pounding in her chest. The rifle rested like an extension of her own bones, a companion more faithful than flesh. The faint oil of the weapon mixed with the earthy musk of the forest floor beneath her. Her breathing slowed until it no longer belonged to her but to the land itself. In that stillness, she owned time. She had not always been a phantom. Once, she had been a soldier in plain sight, deployed to places where the sun scorched the earth and the air reeked of diesel and dust. Her unit had bled together, lived in the same rhythm of danger and hope, until the day one mission turned into a massacre. She had dragged bodies from fire, screamed names that never answered, and stood in the silence of death until she understood that silence would forever be her companion. That silence became her weapon. It carried her back home where civilians dismissed her, where uniformed men overlooked her, where whispers labeled her fragile or misplaced. She had endured the smirks, the quiet underestimations, the doubt that seemed to hover over her like smoke, yet she never argued. She never explained. She simply waited. And now in the forest, her waiting ended. The ambusher scanned desperately, but she offered nothing. No movement, no glint, no breath betrayed her. She struck with patience, cutting through them one by one, dismantling the net that had ensnared the SEAL. Her shots weren't loud, but their impact thundered in the minds of both enemy and ally. The SEAL, wounded and desperate, felt strength seep back into them. Even without knowing her face, they knew her presence. The forest became her chessboard. She funneled the enemy, herded them, drove them into the angles that favored her unseen hand. A leader among the ambushers raised his rifle to finish a pinned SEAL, only to jerk backward, lifeless as her round found its mark. A man who had laughed moments earlier at the SEAL's plight dropped with the same quiet inevitability. What made her terrifying wasn't her accuracy alone. It was her silence. She didn't taunt, didn't roar, didn't claim her victories. She let her deeds carry the weight of truth. And in that truth, the enemy began to break. Fear spread faster than bullets. Men who had arrived certain of slaughter now hesitated, doubted, trembled. Every shadow became a threat, every tree line a grave. The SEAL's seasoned warriors who had been moments from despair rose from their cover, rallied, Courage flooded them not because of orders, but because they realized they were standing beside someone who fought not for glory, not for recognition, but for the unspoken bond of survival and sacrifice. When the last of the ambushers fell or fled into the trees, silence reclaimed the forest. Not the suffocating silence of fear, but the heavy, dignified silence of aftermath. Smoke curled from weapons, sweat dripped from brows, and blood stained the earth. But through it all, a calmness lingered, the kind only one person had carved out of chaos. The seal searched for her, wanting to know, to thank, to understand who had turned their last stand into survival. Yet when they reached the ridge where they thought she had been, they found only flattened grass and the faint trace of boots leading deeper into the wild. She hadn't waited for gratitude. She never did. She had already moved on, carrying her silence with her, leaving only the memory of impossible salvation. Among themselves, the seal spoke quietly. Some swore she was a myth, a spirit of the battlefield, who appeared only when the odds demanded it. Others, who had glimpsed fragments of her in past stories, whispered in barracks and camps, knew better. She was real, and she was far greater than the doubts that had once dismissed her. In time, one of the men repeated words she had once said in another lifetime, words that stayed with him as he sat in the dirt, catching his breath after the nightmare. He remembered her voice, calm, steady, as if carved from stone. Strength doesn't need to shout. Honor doesn't need to be seen. Sacrifice doesn't need applause. And those words spread among them, carried quietly but firmly, until they became the memory of that night. A female sniper who asked for nothing but left everything. The forest would forever hold the echoes of her rifle, the proof that silent dignity can dismantle arrogance, that unseen sacrifice can tip the scales of fate, that respect is not demanded but earned through action. And as the seal were finally extracted, their wounds treated, their spirits steadied. Each man carried with him not just the relief of survival, but the weight of her lesson, that sometimes the greatest heroes are those who leave no name, no spotlight, only the quiet truth that lives on in those they saved. Viewers, wherever you are watching this from, remember her story. Remember the silent strength that turns despair into survival, the unseen sacrifices that never make headlines but shaped destinies. Share your thoughts below, and if her story moved you, subscribe for more stories that honor those who fight battles most of us will never see.